Welcome to the Clear Lens podcast with me, Audrey Kissan. I hope this will be a place where you can get clarity on what's really going on in the world. We're at an inflection point, and it is pretty clear that bias and misinformation are eroding the public's trust in news media. It can be so tempting to tune out, but I really hope you don't. I hope you tune in here instead. I hope you listen in on the chats I'll be having with experts, leaders and advocates who really are passionate about giving you more clarity. Clarity on important issues facing us all today.
You know, it's funny actually. I became aware of it back in 2009, but I'm not sure. Give me just 1 second. I'm sorry. You might have to edit this out. I'm looking at
Don't
my
worry.
West Bank notes and I just want to drag them onto the screen so I have easy access.
Yeah,
And then I
go
am
ahead.
all yours.
Perfect.
Just leave me find.
Take your time.
My screen, my desktop on my laptop is a screen these days because the titles of the folders,
Same.
my
Related
God.
to Palestine. I have all sorts as
Yeah.
well on mine. And I had to, when I was giving a presentation the other night, luckily I thought of it beforehand because I've all sorts of names. I'm
Yeah,
just
the
absolutely
things that you
packed out.
record.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, how I first heard about it was years ago. I had a health shop in Kinsale and somebody had a fundraiser. Somebody that I know had a fundraiser. Do you know who it was actually? It was the artist Tom Campbell. He was living in
Mm,
Kinsale at the time. And he came in looking for a prize for it. So I went along to it that night, and it was back in 2009, I think.
mm.
And I do recall that somebody who I would now recognize to be a Zionist came in and disrupted it at the end. And it was, small town, big drama.
Wow.
And I just remember hearing about it, and I didn't think too much of it afterwards. And it gives me a bit of an insight and understanding into what might be going on for other people now, that they
Mm,
just dipped in, heard about it, and then kind of got on with their lives.
yeah, yeah.
And I think after October 7th happened, I was in Cork and I saw the protest, Cork healthcare workers and Cork Palestine Solidarity campaign. And it was the first time I think I'd ever gone into any protest, but I suppose like many people, I felt compelled to walk with them, and I did. And
Mm,
I cried the whole way through because, it just felt like something that was a pain too great to bear, really.
yeah.
Um, and then I just kept coming back, really. And I think by around Patrick's Day, my eyes were fully open. And it's funny, I'm obviously I'm a psychotherapist and I work with
Yeah.
nervous system regulation and capacity, and I can really see myself how my own capacity changed
Mm,
and how I really started from that place of I don't want to look at this. This is going to hurt me so much to I have to look at this and I have
yes.
capacity
Yes.
to look at this. And if I don't look at this, then I can't really do anything about this.
Mm,
And so I was kind of going to the protests regularly then from about March, and I was just I don't even know the right words. There isn't a big enough word for it, but appalled, shocked. I think my nice, steady little life was, I suppose, like many people, kind of blown apart, really. And when the
mm,
opportunity to go over came as part of the Lagi a summer international camp, I went, and some people were like, "Oh my gosh, you're great to go over there now." And you know why I went? I went because I had to see it for myself,
yes.
you know,
Yeah.
and I did. I did see it for myself then when I went over, and I think that changed everything for me then in terms of, this isn't. going to be a short-term commitment. This is a lifelong commitment because I heard and saw stories there that will stay with me for the rest of my life, really, you know?
Yeah. And before we go into that, because I'd love to hear, about what you witnessed and your role as witness there. I can just so relate to how you've described how you started going to the protests. It was, I remember the moment, because we all have a choice, really, don't we, about how our feeds look and what we see and don't see. And it's a matter of engagement. If we engage with something, we'll see more of that type of content. And I
Yeah.
remember the very first video that really shook me to my core. And I remember just bawling upstairs in my bedroom. It was a little boy and he was in a hospital and he was absolutely traumatized. I'd never seen fear inside such a little body to that extreme. It was indescribable. His eyes were huge and he was shaking and he couldn't talk. And a doctor was kind of tending to him and showed him like lovely, beautiful gentleness and compassion. And it was at that moment where it kind of, the boy let go and just started sobbing while he was being held by the doctor. And the scenes of chaos around the hospital that no person should ever see, not to mind a little boy. And it just totally altered me. And I remember thinking, I should share this. Like this needs to be seen. And then I worried for a second about, oh, it'll distress people who are looking at my stories. And then I quickly checked myself and I went, no, this isn't about our distress. This is about having to speak up. This is about having to share this. So I did. And I think from that moment on, the content just, it flooded our feeds and it
Yeah.
was utterly devastating. And like that, I had to go to a protest. I felt the need, like, first of all, I think I had a lot more belief that it
Mm.
would make our government act from that point of view. But
I know
also, yeah, and I don't feel that when I go to protest now. I feel I go for different reasons, but it was also the importance of being around people who were seeing it the same way and, driven to move in the same way. And
yeah,
that was really important because when you see this kind of like evil and violence,
yeah,
it's very disorientating to be around people who are oblivious, you know?
yeah.
Um,
And, you
so
know,
that, mm,
sorry, go ahead.
no, you're okay. I think my internet, I'm not sure, is it mine? It's not great. But yeah, it's just being around people who see it that way and who are just as determined to do something, and figure out what needs to be done, you know?
Mm. And you know that part that you say about going because you really believed if you took this brave step and actually went out and shouted in the street. I mean, when I heard you say
Mm,
that, I went, yeah, I really thought if I stepped over that threshold of public roaring in the street, that somehow, if there was enough of us, that the government and, would take notice of it and would do something. And I think that's been equally an enraging eye opener as well, that um, that the veil has been lifted on their complicity and that they're just not listening. And I would definitely have been one of those people who would have seen Simon Harris going around to all the lovely agricultural shows and petting the baby lamb, and I would have voted for the
yeah,
likes of him because of that. And I just think
just being duped.
being
Mm,
duped, yeah. I mean, that's a huge
mm.
eye opener. Yeah, and I'm glad my eyes are open to it, to be
Yeah,
honest.
it's an extreme change from thinking that, protesting would actually have an impact to
Yeah,
uncovering slowly but surely, because of the likes of, the Ditch or other kind of independent journalists, just the depth of our complicity.
yeah,
The last guest here we spoke about, Derek Cogley,
Mm.
We spoke about the trade between Ireland and Israel, and how Ireland per capita contributes more via trade to the Israeli economy than any country on earth.
Yeah.
And
Isn't that
that alone,
shocking?
it is truly, truly shocking, because we have this image of ourselves as a nation that's a defender of human rights. And then the reality is that we're doing more to uphold the economy of this genocidal state than any other nation on earth per
Yeah.
capita. And that's very, I it kind of disconnects you from your sense of Irishness as it was. It's like, well, what is it to be Irish today? It certainly isn't what I thought it was. Um,
Yeah.
we've let this system take over, which totally and utterly fuels this war machine
Yeah.
against the will of the vast majority of the population. And with that realization, there just comes this responsibility, I feel, for us to do in our country in the ways that we can, whatever we possibly can, to first of all make people aware, because that isn't being talked about enough in the media. The media has been such a failure. And also, we need a system change massively, because we've seen how the politicians have plumosed through the election with all of their talk about the OTB and Simon Harris's puppy eyes, talking about compassion. And then you look at the actions, and how, this OTB continued to be postponed. Now it's not even going to include services. And this implementation of the IHRA definition without a mention
Yes.
of it before the election, as though to say, right, we're home and dry, let's adopt this definition that's going to conflate criticism of Israel with anti Semitism, and thus putting a muzzle, or trying to put a muzzle on
Yeah.
dissent, you know?
And even
Mm,
yesterday, how, or sorry, on Friday, how it was being debated, in the Dáil about is it the Terrorism Act, and how
that's
they're
right.
adapting it to include glorification, and how you can just see it so clearly in the rhetoric of um, interviewers now on news stations, how they're putting the word in there, they're sowing the seeds for it, and
Mm,
how our government kind of go out on the campaign trail with drop the breadcrumbs of, oh, sure, we'll improve housing and we'll do this, and we believe it and buy it. But actually, they're not doing that at all, firstly, for us here in Ireland. But then they're making massive decisions like, uncoupling the triple lock, and
mm,
allowing weapons through Shannon, and
mhm.
allowing the facilitation of Israeli war bonds, and
Yeah,
he's signing us up to quite serious things like the safe protocol. What is that they signed us up to rearm Europe, and none of this is going
yeah,
to the people. None of this is going to a vote, and
no.
that is, I remember speaking to Billy Kelleher when we were up in Cork Airport one night, and a colleague was coming home. She's a nurse, and she went and did a medical trip to Gaza. And we just happened to
Mm,
be there. And, Billy Kelleher came in off the plane after her. So we decided, again, there's that threshold of, do I speak to him? Do I not? And
yeah.
we just
Can you
thought,
just explain who Billy Kelleher is? Sorry for
he's a
listeners. Billy
member of
Kelleher.
European Parliament. Um,
Yeah.
and
For
he
yeah.
had, do you know what? We didn't know it then, but he had just come back from voting Ursula von der Leyen back in. And we decided to kind of tackle him, that time last year about the Israeli war bonds. And he really was, you know, um, I found him really dismissive. He was saying, that's
Mm,
absolutely outrageous. There's no way war bonds are being sold in Ireland. And here we are now. And, I did stand my ground at the time, but here we are now, and it's public information. And the fact that they do try to hide this from us and dismiss us and belittle us. And he said at the
mhm.
time, people are becoming too political, is what he said to me. And
Oh my God.
and that is what
Mm,
they think we'll go out on the campaign trail and we give them breadcrumbs about housing and childcare and a bit of this and a bit of that. Um, you know, people are not going to be educated about the politics, but I think they've
Yeah,
politicized the nation. We are all,
absolutely. And politics is
politicized now.
it's all our business, and we should always have been. And I think all these realizations are dawning on us. It's a privilege not to be politicized. We understand now that it's, unless you're being impacted, and, it's, it isn't important. But the truth is that we all should be politicized. We all should be highly informed of the decisions they're making on our behalf. And that has been, I suppose, a huge kind of realization as well. And just when you say that his response was people are becoming too political, I mean, doesn't that just say so much? It's like, leave it to us, leave it to us. We'll do all this decision making. What guys know? And also that gaslighting that happens, and there's this condescension that comes with it, where they try to kind of obfuscate things that are really plain and simple,
Mm,
saying that their hands are tied legally when it comes to making decisions like ending the facilitation of the sale of war bonds. We have Sinn Féin's bill, which was legally like robust. They had been advised by the Oireachtas. There was a group of Oireachtas legal experts that said that, states like Ireland can act independently to withhold financial services. And then we have this debate over issues that are just, it's like they're kicking in our eyes, and we know it. But they think if they speak in a complex enough way, we'll just give up or we'll become jaded. Um, and that's not working anymore, because
no,
we can see it. And there might have been a time where you could kind of shame or belittle someone into retreating from an argument, but it isn't working now. Um, but they're also not giving up. And I think without having a really strong mainstream media, and we don't, I like that's been a
no.
key area of focus for me. Um, we have a
That's another eye
media
opener for me. I'm like, what?
massively,
The news
massively.
lies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, huge. And at the start, when I was speaking out against it, I thought, oh, people will think I'm a conspiracy theorist. But I thought, forget about
Yeah,
it. The evidence is, it's too plain. It's too plain, and it's too in front of me. I can see what I see on my phone, and it is not matching the news I am seeing on the TV. Um, but yeah, I think I have kind of, I suppose, gone from thinking we could, I suppose, petition the government or government TDs into action, to understanding that
mm,
no, they will never change, because this neoliberal system from which they profit and are fully supportive of, um, that they're not just going to change their ideological viewpoints or, their core political leanings. And that means that we need a strong opposition in this country. And
yes.
it's funny, like, because I was writing a piece today, as I sometimes do when I try to make sense out of things. I thought, I feel like I'm done emailing TDs. you know, as a practice, I feel like I'm done. Like, they're not listening. And an awful lot of time and energy has been put into even writing these emails. And there you have a group of opposition who are actually paid and voted in to serve as opposition. And I thought, the leadership for any kind of civil disobedience or mass strikes would need to come from the people that we literally elect to serve in
Yeah.
opposition. And it hit me
Hmm.
that I thought, yeah, I think we need to focus more and demand more of the opposition
Yeah.
in this country.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's a good way. And, isn't it interesting when we were talking earlier about liberation movements and about division,
Mm,
but even
mm,
within the opposition on the left, one of the
mm.
things, it was their ideological perspectives and being purist about it that kept them from uniting on the
Yeah.
left, with a core kind of goal really of uniting,
Mm,
because they were just getting hung up on ideological stuff, and so staying very small, people
mhm,
before profit who are absolutely incredible, refusing to
mhm,
see eye to eye with Sinn Féin, and Sinn Féin being the largest party on the left.
mhm.
So it,
Yeah.
in many ways, I think the left are uniting, maybe not uniting enough to form a government that will be able to tackle
Mm,
what I would consider very right-wing government
yes. Yeah.
in place at the moment, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they certainly are uniting.
I do see that. I do see that they're kind of copping on to
Yeah.
this kind of the exhaustion amongst the public for an alternative. We need and we want an alternative. And the only viable way to get that is if the left unites in a meaningful way instead of trying to kind of tear strips at each other, because the only parties that benefit from a divided left are the parties that have put in this position that we are in, you know. Um, but I'd like to see stronger um, opposition. I think
Yeah.
more meaningful, because I think we're running out of time, and what we've been trying to date is it hasn't been effective enough, you know. Um,
Yeah,
but
but
in
isn't it also, you know, really evident as well? Like it has been really evident to me this time. I think I would have just looked at the elections in a very simplistic way of, oh, they're the smallest party. But now I can see how the system itself, the current system that's in place, actively works to ignore the quite significant mandate that parties like Sinn
yes,
Féin get to systematically exclude them from government and
hmm
in turn systematically excluding a very large proportion of the population's voice.
hmm
Because, you know, I was listening to Simon Harris talking to Pierce Doherty in the Doyle the other day
last week.
online. And
Ooh,
I
I heard
thought,
that.
yeah, and I
Yeah,
thought you got less seats than them, you know. But
yeah,
this is the propaganda that they put out there. You know, if you weren't voted in like me, and he wasn't voted in, they cobbled together a coalition and excluded a
hmm
significant mandate, and they are now collectively calling themselves the centrist government. Which isn't it great? They're finally owning up to the fact that they're the same party. And they're not
hmm
actually interested in any social policies in the country. What they're interested
no,
in is serving the imperial colonial empire that is the EU, which,
mm,
and their main kind of source of revenue and area for growth and focus is militarization.
I know. And this is the part that really, really should have people up in arms, um,
Mm,
because we're spending 5% of GDP, fiscal rules broken all across Europe, so we can spend on
yeah.
defence industry while we're supposed to be a neutral country. Like, our neutrality has been eroding over time, but the triple lock is what's left of it. And if we lose that, we're going into illegal NATO wars. We're propping up an empire, and we're feeding. And let's face it, it's going to be the working class population to the war machine. And it's we're not having these conversations enough in the mainstream. People, I really don't feel understand the precipice we're at, and they also don't understand, because of the media, um, how the triple lock even came to be. You know, when you consider that it was because we were spooked about saying yes treaty that had a solidarity clause in it,
Mm,
which said if one member state gets attacked, we all get attacked. And we said no. And the trick was given to us as an assurance. Look, this is our solemn promise to you that if you accept this treaty, we'll never sacrifice our neutrality. And that very promise is being pulled away quietly without much
mm.
fuss in the background. Um, and that's that, no
By the
vote.
same man, Micheál
Yeah,
Martin.
yes, no, and not flinching, not blinking. And he stood up in the Dáil and said the triple lock is the core of our neutrality. Fast forward, and he's saying it's not. And luckily, like, we have
Same
these things
guy.
on video, but it's remarkable, like, how I can't even find the words to describe the level of gaslighting they're getting away with, because they're not being challenged by the people who are tasked with doing that and defending the public interest, which is the press, journalists. We have just the most tepid most docile group of popular journalists in this country, and I can barely even tune in anymore, you know. They systematically ignore Palestinian voices and
Yeah.
decide to report on things if, for example, Haaretz says it has happened. And you see this like dehumanization that is become hyper normalized. And you're thinking, how on
Mm.
earth is a profession that is kind of born of a duty to give voice to the oppressed getting away with it on this scale? Uh,
Yeah.
it's
And
mind.
when you think of this idea of colonization and decolonization and were our minds still colonized, I distinctly remember at various points growing up always hearing the news in the background, the Gaza Strip, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank. And it's been normalized for decades, this
Mm,
idea that sure, they're all fighting each other over there and it's okay. And now that I know, I'm like, my God, only
yeah,
for social media and for Palestinians being able to advocate for themselves and publicize their own voices and having to actually publicize their traumas for us to see, we would have been buying that still,
oh yeah, yeah,
decades of the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and the same language that we are now critiquing and saying, gosh, they never mention Israel and they never say who did it. They've been doing this for decades.
yeah. They've been getting
Normalized.
away with it,
Yeah.
normalizing and trying to portray it as this like intractable conflict there, or, you know, of two sides with equal kind of claim to the land that are just fighting it
Mm.
out. And that it's what I was talking the other night about how they remove history and context so that, you know, people, I suppose, to make sense of world events need that. They need the history and they need context. And when you don't give that in a news report, things just seem to happen out of nowhere and
Yeah.
they're incomprehensible. And that's when you get away, the media gets away with saying things like October 7th happened because Palestinian terrorists hate Jewish people. And people buy that because they're systematically deprived of the context and the history, which is that in 1948, terrorist groups butchered
Hmm.
Palestinians and burnt and razed their villages to the ground.
Yeah.
Um, through a movement that cited biblical promises and
Mm.
claims to a land that never actually always belonged to them. Palestinians are
Yeah.
indigenous to the land. There were multiple types of people living and Israel was never a country. You know,
Yeah. And that
um,
it's documented as well. I mean, a
mm,
Palestinian friend of mine, he's a psychotherapist. He lives here now in Ireland, and he recommended that I watch Tantura.
mm,
And that I don't know if you've watched Tantura,
no,
but it is rough going. It was, was it actually filmed sometime around the 2000s, maybe. I don't have that accurate, I don't think.
mm,
But it was, they interviewed the survivors of the perpetrator of the Nakba. So it was
oh,
all
I've
these
seen
old,
the clips, Karen. I've seen the clips,
yeah,
Karen.
you've seen them, yeah.
Go ahead, go, yeah.
That was the hardest watch of my life. I had to break it up. I was, I was, shocked to my core because they just acknowledged it. They acknowledged what they did. They acknowledged, the sexual assaults. They acknowledged the massacres, the murders. I understand that this is where the baby in the oven story might have come from, that actual time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
these were the men survivors who were laughing, totally detached and dissociated from whatever they had survived themselves,
Mm,
that made them like this, as younger men in the death camps
mm,
and relocating here then to Palestine and what they perpetrated when they arrived on innocent Palestinians as a result. And they were
mm,
detached from it. They were detached from the pain that they inflicted. Um, but the fact that that's there as a documented piece of
mm.
evidence for what happened, and yet we still choose to deny it, you
It,
know?
it's hard to kind of keep saying sometimes the more you know. And like you said, how much of it is actually so well documented. There isn't a scarcity of evidence. to
Yeah.
show how this happened. I remember watching Farha at the start, I'd say maybe in December 2023, which is a movie, but it's about the 1948, and it's kind of told through the eyes of a young Palestinian girl and her village being attacked, and the violence and it is just incomprehensible. Um,
Mm.
and also how it can be in any way legitimized that the Israelis have this indigenous right to the land when
Yeah.
they're coming from Eastern Europe, or they're coming from Brooklyn, all over the world,
Mm.
to take homes belonging to Palestinians and to use
Mm.
violence to take it. And
Yeah.
I struggle so much to accept how you can read a news article and it can say the war, first of all, war in Gaza began on October 7th,
Yeah.
when Palestinian militants stormed into Israel, like out of nowhere. And you have the likes of Ursula von der Leyen um, saying that it happened because they hate Jewish people, which
Yeah.
is just such a gross um, lie, and it's a brazen lie. And
And coming from a German as well, it's
mm,
massively problematic because you can kind of see the link then and how, they're not taking responsibility and accountability for their own,
mhm,
inhumane crimes, and how they, you know, stayed in power from what it seems like actually since, and how they have been allowed to kind of participate in another Holocaust on another people without being
yes.
and supervised. So
Mm,
it's incredible, really, because the Holocaust is in living memory. We have all seen dozens and dozens of films that have opened our eyes to what happened to the Jewish people, at the hands of the legitimate German government of the 1940s.
yes.
And yet here we are listening to the legitimate government, German government, saying the exact same things about another
Mm,
people.
mm,
And
yeah.
that's not being stopped. That's not being interrupted. And, you know,
It's just, that word legitimate. It just makes me think of, you know, when power, I suppose, and when these institutions that are officially deemed legitimate, when they become criminal, it
yeah,
becomes duty to dissent. Some of the worst atrocities in human history have been because people have complied with really, really corrupt governments. And I think that moment that we're at, where we're beginning to understand that governments aren't listening,
yeah,
and that the tactics that we have tried aren't working, and we've got to figure out what's next. How is change going to actually materialize? And it's going to take a tremendous amount of courage
mm,
and leadership and conviction and community. And I just hope that I don't know, do we have it in us? Does the world have it in us? Sometimes I think we do. And sometimes I think when you look at the sheer numbers of people that are showing up, when, like, a few weeks ago, there was videos of protesters outside The Hague in the Netherlands. It was enormous. You see up to 1 million people showing up in London. And I do feel like that we're definitely not appreciating the scale of how many people are on board, because it's actively censored. Um, we
yeah,
see that with our own protests in Ireland. It's in their interest not to give us confidence in our numbers.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think sometimes, I guess, I feel like, what's next and how do we escalate, and who's going to lead that? Is the opposition in Ireland going to lead it, or yeah,
And when you think about the source of kind of the pain, and a lot of this militarization in the world, and in kind of current times, it is coming from, states like the US, the UK, And I think all the upheaval within their countries themselves is probably what's going to lead to that change, because you
Mm,
have to rely on one of two things for change to happen. Either people kind of, recognize their humanity and they change and they go towards that, or they feel their own pain. They suffer as a result themselves.
hmm.
And I definitely think the US is suffering.
Yeah.
The US is in chaos right now, and I hope, my wish is that they vote for something else. And I don't mean going back to the other side. I mean that they
Mm,
vote for somebody who is a humanitarian and somebody who is going to affect real change and move them away from the militarization that has, destroyed the Middle
mm,
East, that has absolutely destroyed the Middle East.
yeah. It's like a whole new politics needs to be created, that we need to
Yeah,
move away from capitalism. We need to move away from neoliberalism. It's destroying the climate, the world, the environment, and it is destroying human lives. Our international
yeah,
system is crumbling around us. Um, and the pace of it is so fast. It feels like it's escalating all the time. We're going from crisis to crisis, and all the while, um, watching just the most. It's even hard to find words, but I come back to evil. What is being perpetrated? What is being done to the Palestinians? What we're
yeah.
watching now, reading a Chris Hedges article a couple of weeks ago where he said, it's nearing the end stages, and just the scenes in what they're calling humanitarian um,
Mm.
zones, or what they're calling this. I can't think of the name of the organization. The Israeli American Food Distribution. Yes,
As a humanitarian fund.
I mean, like, it's disgusting. And you see the setup of it whereby there's only three of them in the entire to feed a population of over 2 million. And that's another part of it. The death toll is actually much higher than we now
And what
know.
nobody keeps talking about, everyone's like talking about the bombing and the murdering, and
Mm,
different countries are debating it and justifying it, and we've almost lost sight of the fact that they are trapped in there. They are being
yeah.
deliberately trapped in there, that the
Mm,
siege is still in
mm,
effect. This siege that was
mm.
supported by the US 20 years ago, it's still in effect, and that
Yes.
that act hasn't been lifted. Nobody can go in, nobody can go out. And how that's something that hasn't even been discussed in a long time. It doesn't even rate
Mm,
now in any political conversations. The fact that there is a
yeah.
20-year siege on Gaza and nobody's
Yes.
allowed in or out.
It's a concentration camp,
It is
I've
an
heard
open.
people call it, an open air concentration camp. And now the conditions are beyond what any of us could imagine. And just seeing the setup of just this, I don't want to call it a humanitarian organization. That's not what it is. They're like killing fields. And I heard them, one, I think he was a US, I know he was an IDF member actually, speaking to Haaretz, describe how they look at it like the Squid Game, that awful
Wow.
Netflix show
I haven't
where
seen
they're
it, but I
just,
know the idea.
yeah, it's just these depraved levels of violence, but it's like a game,
Yeah,
and that
that
they
they are
just,
desensitized from it.
yeah, and they're
And,
shooting. Mm.
sorry, go ahead.
That they're shooting Palestinians arbitrarily for no reason. They're unarmed, and he's saying, this IDF soldier, that it barely features on the news. That the
I
Western world. Mm,
sat next to an IDF soldier on the way over to Ida that time, and
yes.
he was, a man maybe kind of midlife. He had his son with him. His son was about 17, and once he found out that I was Irish, it was like it was his mission to convince me that they were good people. But exactly what you're talking about that IDF soldier was the conversation. And he showed me, I wasn't on Telegram then, I didn't know it, but he showed me all their sites on Telegram, um, and showed me graphs. They literally indoctrinate each other on it. He had served in the IDF. He was a school teacher in Bethlehem, and he had
Okay.
4 children, 3 grown up, and the young lad with him. All 3 of his children had served in the IDF. 2 had completed their service. And this is how he spoke. And I think for me, it was like, oh my God, he's actually saying this to my face. I'm hearing it directly from
Mm.
somebody. And he showed me graphs of different genocides. And this was a year ago. And he said, look, there's the Darfur genocide, there's the genocide in Rwanda. And he showed me Afghanistan and Iraq. And he gave the figures in millions. And it was somebody had gone to the trouble of making this graph. And he said, look, we have only killed 100,000 in Gaza. And I feel sick even now. And I feel like crying talking about it, that somebody has lost their humanity and says this and does
Mm.
this. And I said, would you not think that there are 100,000 souls? Because he said, look, we've only killed 100,000. And it's so unfair how the world looks at us. And in comparison to everyone else, we're getting so much hate and anti Semitism. And I said, would you not think that they are 100,000 souls? And he said, we have to kill them. If we don't, they'll rise up and kill us. And this was our conversation, and I challenged him the whole way, but this is the conversation. I asked him, was he concerned about his own children dying? And he said, my children are middle class. My children will get jobs within Israel. We send the lower class poor kids to Gaza. And you
It's
talked
just
about this
vile.
earlier. It's the way of the world, isn't it? In this militarization, they're going to basically create economies that create a very bleak outlook for young people in terms of education, make education elitist, make a lot of things unavailable and unaffordable, like healthcare. And then you have a lot of disenfranchised, disillusioned young people who think it's actually a great idea to go into the defense forces.
That's right.
They're cannon fodder.
That's exactly it. And they're given like these perks and a salary that might lure
Yeah.
them into a body bag, as is the only way to put it, because it isn't into a life um, that they deserve better. Basically, it isn't into a good life. And I think people struggle to believe or confront the reality of this, that this is what's happening. There might, I don't know, is it denial? Is it naivety? Is it just a misguided sense of trust in the systems that are leading us now? I find it hard to kind of pinpoint any one thing. But what I definitely know is that enough people aren't aware that this is the system that is being kind of, you know, thrust on us. Um,
Mm.
and it's being done in a really intensified way. And the same people who are complicit in the genocide of Palestine are the ones that are ramping up military spending
Yes.
and eroding neutrality and getting rid of it and lying to the
The
election,
revenue
pre-election.
stream. It's the global revenue stream now, in the same way that tech or vaccines, or going all the way back to the Industrial Revolution. This is the new revenue stream. It's militarization, and everybody's signing up to it, including
Mm-hmm.
Ireland. And for me, when I kind of go down these holes of despair, I really try to pull myself back and go, okay, well, if that's the facts and if that's what's happening, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And it is about that personal sacrifice of, well, I'm going to stop contributing to the whole capitalism
Mm-hmm.
cycle, and stop over consuming and stop overbuying and stop, you know, purchasing from the big names and the
Yeah,
Coca-Colas, and
boycotting. Mm-hmm.
engaging in boycotting and just starting to be personally accountable, and then let that radiate out for me with my children, who are adults who can make up their own mind, and do make up their own mind, but I do educate them.
Mm.
Actually, it's
Same.
funny, as I talk about my children, my boys are adults, and um, I think they thought I was a bit daft, or maybe were a little bit embarrassed. I mean, I hope they don't hear this now, but I definitely know that there was a couple of raised eyebrows about me out protesting and shouting in the streets and Jesus, Mom, what are you doing?
Mm.
And then my lads went traveling to a Muay Thai gym in Thailand last year. So when I was in the West Bank, the lads were in a Muay Thai gym in Thailand and they stayed there for a couple of months. And who do they encounter but, hundreds and hundreds of IDF soldiers on leave in the Muay Thai camps.
Wow.
So they got a full exposure to male and female IDF soldiers. And if there's something that's going to radicalize a couple of lads, it's going to be that. Because when I was in the West Bank, I had
Good.
my son, sending me voice notes going, this is terrible. Do you know what they
Mm.
think? Do you know what they say? Do you know how they speak about people and speak about exterminating Palestinians and children? And, they're fully on board now with them, which is
Mm.
incredible. So
Yeah.
all it took
Yeah.
was them to actually experience it. And that worries me because, these soldiers who are being indoctrinated into so much hate, the IDF, they're going to travel. Our children are
Yeah.
going to encounter them.
The thoughts of it, yeah, is quite frightening. Um,
They're
that
creating a monster. They're not going to stay within their own
mm,
space. They're going to travel.
yeah, the impunity will come back to haunt us. Our own
Yeah.
complicity will come back to haunt us. Our government's complicity will haunt us. And you say it's about like when you experience it. You were in the West Bank
Mm,
last year. Was it last year? And one thing that strikes me, and I wanted to get your view of, is Micheál Martin was in the West Bank, right? A few weeks before October 7th.
mm,
And he was quoted as saying during that time that he said it wasn't helpful to call what was happening in the West Bank apartheid. Now, as
yeah.
someone who has been there and has experienced it, to me, it's like, how could you actually go there, see with your own eyes what's happening, and still make that statement? Um, so, just your thoughts on that and your experience of apartheid in the West Bank.
I think it does matter literally which side of the wall you were on. And, I traveled through, what would be classed as the Israeli side. And I imagine that Micheál Martin went there as a diplomatic guest and took all that in. Um,
Mm,
he has, I mean, back in 2020, he was even contributing towards particular charitable organizations based in Jerusalem as well. The
mm,
Abraham Initiative, he's financed that, which is this really idealized version of Palestinians and Israelis coming together in harmony while
wow.
there is active apartheid on the other side of the wall. And I don't think Micheál Martin went into any refugee camps,
Mm,
and I don't think Micheál Martin actually went and really looked. But what I do know is, I think it was in 2014, after one of the intifadas, Micheál Martin looked to get into Gaza and
hmm
Israel denied him access. And he is one of the few leaders in the world to actually get into Gaza. And he did get in because the Egyptians got him in. I don't know, was it
mm,
10 or 14 years ago? Was it 2010 or 2014 he went in? But he got
right.
in and he saw the destruction and he saw the devastation. And many Irish newspapers reported on it, and they're still available online. And
Mm,
after seeing that, never mind last, in October
mm,
2023 or September 23
mm,
when he was in Gaza after the destruction of one of the intifadas. And he
mm,
still holds the position that he does today that, you know, what happened afterwards in October 7th wasn't justified. Like
mm,
he had absolutely nothing to say prior to that, all these years, and took no kind of active function or active part in ending the apartheid or ending the siege, even when you think about
Yeah.
it, that was
Yeah.
imposed on Gaza afterwards. He saw it all, came out, did nothing. And, it's that position too that I find very difficult when I hear Simon Harris saying, the obstruction to peace was the incident that happened, that time in October 2023, but they were okay with what was happening beforehand, as in, there
Yeah.
was some semblance of peace. They consider incidents like that to be the obstruction to peace.
I
So
mean,
what do
it
you
is
have to say
just,
about everything prior to that? Was that okay?
and I mean, what kind of a person do you have to be? And what kind of a value system do you have to be able to walk away from that level of, I mean, it's 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 extermination, but it's been a slow extermination. Now it's intensified. But everything we've learned about the conditions in Gaza for decades, and to think that he was there and he stood there and he witnessed it. Like, you hear so many accounts of people who go, like, for example, Gabor Mate is one, and he said he cried for 2 weeks. He cried for two
Yeah,
weeks straight. Just the sheer impact of it. Nobody leaves the same person as when they go. So what does
yeah.
he have within him that allows him to completely not care, detach? I won't say, well, I will actually, because um, he hasn't done
Well, he
enough.
traded. He traded
Mm,
with Israel afterwards. He not only traded, but he increased
mm,
Israel, and somehow he was able to compartmentalize what he saw there.
yeah.
And when you think of that, there seems to be some idea fed to us that, oh, it's politics or it's economics. But it's
Yes.
not, because if you were to consider here, if there was somebody living in your housing estate and he was employing a few people, but he was going
Hmm.
around murdering the neighbors, you wouldn't be
Yes.
able to compartmentalize the
Absolutely
murdering
not.
of neighbors in exchange for the benefits, the economic benefits. It's just absolutely ludicrous to say that, the cost of our economic security is ignoring a genocide. It's too high a price to pay, and we don't want to pay it here in Ireland.
No,
I
we
certainly don't
don't.
want to, do it,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and it should be
Yeah.
an option for us that
Hmm.
we get to decide on that because, you know, it's like the semblance or the appearance of democracy at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah. It's totally, democracy is failing. And I think it's failing across the world. We are losing rights like free speech with the IHRA definition. Um, we are losing the ability to even decide on our own neutrality and our future. Um, Social services, the housing market. I mean, Dara Cogley brilliantly went through that in the last podcast. The scale of it, of our disenfranchisement,
Mm,
is I've certainly never felt it to this degree. Just how powerless we are, really, in the face of the system that we're currently living in, and that's where the urgency is. There's such an urgency for people to get on board with this and to realize nothing is going to change and things are only going to get worse unless we step up, you know.
yeah.
Um, and that
And
is
I'm
the challenge.
yeah, it is the challenge, and I'm even surprised at times at my own lack of regard for the politicians that we have. But then when I weigh that up on the other side, that I have two beautiful lads that are, potentially the ones that could get sent out to fight a foreign war that, in essence, is just about arms and money, then
Hmm.
I feel compelled to speak up, you
Yeah.
know. And if
Hmm.
not them, then it could be some grandchildren down the line. And absolutely not. I don't want anyone to look back and go, gosh, when this militarization by stealth was coming in, what were you doing about it? You
Mm,
know? Because
yes.
in some ways, I do think, that the role of the young really is to go off and enjoy themselves. And it's us, it's our generation that needs to be speaking up and going, actually, no.
Yeah, definitely. We're supposed to protect the children. We're supposed to protect their futures. And enough of us aren't doing that, I think. Well, it's hard to get enough people aren't aware. I I do feel that awareness is key to drive action. And I think that's where I focus a lot of my attention on, is making people aware. Now, there's of course a case to be made that, you know, sometimes you'll make people aware and they'll they won't necessarily feel the same. Like I know a friend, a friend of a friend, when they were being told about the loss of our neutrality via the triple lock, they said, well, you have to move with the times. You have to kind of, you know, keep up. And you just kind of think, oh my God, like, what, how could anyone have that feeling when thinking about the kinds of wars that are existing in the world today? How brutal, how vicious, and to think that anyone could think, oh yeah, I'd give that a green light. It's beyond belief. I do think that's a tiny minority, though, particularly in Ireland, and the polls show that. Anytime the Irish people are polled in terms of our neutrality, the vast majority of us want to keep the triple lock. You know,
Yeah.
the polls are in the 70%, 75%. So that's clear. Um, but yeah, just in terms of like the last couple of years, and how they've,
Mm.
I suppose, changed so many of us. Like it's something I often say to people. I feel like fundamentally changed as a person. There was the life in the bubble I was living in, where, you know, it was about me and my family and my circle, and, you know, the holidays and this, that, and everything, and just, I suppose, yeah, a relative state of oblivion, versus the I wanted to take the whole system down, you
I
know, in a
know.
relatively short period of time.
My
Um,
holidays are to the West Bank now. This is my idea of a
yeah,
holiday, you know.
yeah, yeah. It's not. It's never going to be the same again. It's like
No.
when you wake up, it's there's absolutely no going back, and that isn't a bad thing, because, you know, for reality to change, it needs to be confronted. But yeah, there's a lot, I guess, in terms of understanding and knowing it's for the long haul, and resourcing yourself for that. You know,
Yeah.
like you were saying earlier, it's a
Mm.
lifelong commitment. Like this isn't a commitment that's going to pass. Um, and
And I
what
look
do you?
back at I
Mhm,
sorry, I remember on that, like I look back at photographs of myself, because you'll never have as many photographs taken of yourself as when you're in protest, because everyone has, you know, or is putting up their
mm,
photographs afterwards. And I can
mm,
see the trajectory of the impact when you talk about the impact.
mm,
You know,
yeah.
I could see, you know, around March or April, just, you know, the drawn kind of gaunt look on my face. I had massive eye bags just from not sleeping and going to sleep worried. And I remember hearing Gabor Mate say, I go to sleep with Gaza on my mind and I wake up with Gaza on my mind. And I can
Yeah.
certainly relate to that.
Mm,
Just that, eyes bulging, eyes sore, you
mm,
know, looking for some hope the next day and just seeing even worse horror across the phone screens. And, you know, that being the driver to go out and see, can I do something? Can I do something?
mm-hmm. Yeah. That's I remember hearing that. It's the last thing I think of at night and the first thing in the morning, and that is literally it. And just wanting to believe that something will shift or change or stop, and being confronted with the total opposite of that. Like that
Mm.
the depravity, just, it knows no bounds, and somehow it can get worse and more depraved. And the
Yeah,
inaction of the people most powerful to do something to change it, they remain complicit. And you scream and you shout, and yeah, I think, like I was saying at the beginning, we're at that stage now where we realize the things that we thought would move the needle aren't going to, and it's going to call for something else. And obviously, naturally the best people placed for that would be the opposition. But I
mm,
don't know if they've fully stepped into that now. You know, when you look back in Irish history, all
mm,
of, you know, the rising, it led with new political parties that, you know, Sinn Féin, Um, so I don't know is the answer that, but I'm searching. But I do feel a focus of mine will be on demanding more from the opposition,
Yeah.
because government TDs aren't going to wake up with a conscience in the morning that they didn't
Yeah.
have for the past 2 years with the overwhelming amount of evidence we all have in front of us, you know.
Yeah.
Even the most recent moves they're making are doing nothing but kind of cement their position. They're not including services in the OTB. They're not going to end the facilitation of the sale of war bonds, and they're intent on militarization. So I just think that part of I don't know, like, is it kind of an acceptance of reality and a kind of I'm done knocking my head against the same wall. And that definition of as insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. It's like it's not happening. They're not going to listen. um so getting a bit more demanding of the opposition, and all of us realizing that it's going to take all of us to be a little bit bolder, whatever that means to everyone, you know
Yeah.
and finding your place in all of this, because that's a really important piece, isn't it? Because everyone, I guess, has a role based on who they are, really, and what they bring. um you have a full spectrum of activism, everything from direct action, which is
Mm,
really brave, like what we've seen in Shannon.
mm,
Pal action, they're just amazingly courageous individuals. Everything from that to people who are fundraising and raising vital funds for Palestinian families who have nothing and need that support. Awareness raising, knowledge,
mm.
information, trying to cut through the propaganda and everything in between. But what do you think about people, I suppose, picking a lane, choosing a lane, and maybe excelling in that versus trying to spread yourself out and do absolutely everything? Because I know in the beginning, maybe that was something a lot of us were guilty of. I have to be at every event, I have to do everything. And then you realize this is impossible to do everything, but you can make a bigger impact in the ways that you're maybe uniquely placed to do it in a wider community.
Yeah. Yeah. I would
Mm,
agree. And I definitely don't think I'm in any position to be telling anyone else kind of what to do, but I do know from my own perspective that, it's a constant experiment to see,
mm,
where can I be helpful? What do I have capacity for today or this week? And
mm,
that's something that is ever changing. And I've definitely fitted into a place now where I just accept and do what comes up next. So I'm
mm,
doing a bit of fundraising at the moment.
mm,
And, I would have been going to the protests a lot, and then I didn't have capacity to go to them
mm,
because that anger and that place of despair at kind of maybe not being listened to. Um, but I really do appreciate those who do have the capacity to consistently keep that up.
mm.
Um, so yeah, I would agree with everything you just said. It's
Yeah.
whatever you have capacity for, because there's some people out there like Irish visual artists for Gaza. My God, and Pierce and Gaza Gabra, you know,
Hmm.
I won't give the figures because I'm not sure, maybe they're meant to be public, but I was speaking with him recently in a group, and he gave the figures of what he has fundraised. And I mean, he's devoted and given over his whole life to this.
Mm.
So people have incredible capacity. A
Yes.
friend of mine is a nurse. She's just come back from her third medical mission. My God, what capacity
Wow.
to help there. So, whatever it is, if you kind of go to the protest, whatever it is that you have
Mm,
capacity for, it's
mm.
okay, because it's going to take all of us, isn't it?
It is going to take
Going
all
to,
of us,
it's
all of
going to
us,
take all of us. Yeah.
most definitely. And when you visited the West Bank, Kerry,
Mm.
what did you feel while you were there and after you came back? How would you say, like, it, I suppose, changed you, I'd imagine, or did it? Or did you go, because we see so much now on our phones as well, but being there, I imagine, is a totally different level.
I felt a lot of frustration and constriction when I was there because we made friends with obviously the people who hosted us. Um, I stayed for a while after the international camp, so I was there for maybe about 3.5 weeks,
Right.
and you kind of get to know people. And as we were traveling around, just the restrictions on people and then how they were treated at checkpoints and watching things happen is a very bizarre thing to watch something happen and know that you will cause more harm if you try to step in. Because I have always been somebody who steps in my whole
Mm,
life. You
mm,
know, I have witnessed violence in the street and things like that. And it usually, if there's going to be somebody in our group that's going to step in, it's probably going to be me. So
yeah,
I've
it'd be like that.
shied away from that. But I've never had the added piece where if I step in, somebody in my group here could be, legitimately or legally detained or come to great harm because of my intervention here.
Right.
So you have to stand and watch people that you're with be abused and disrespected and pushed around by, young soldiers who are carrying some kit, rocket launcher on the back, a full belt of military gear all around their waist. They're holding a rifle and they're armed, their hands are on it, they've no problem pointing it at you. You know, in Hebron in particular, we were detained by the IDF from walking down, I think it's called Shuhada Street. They were saying, "Oh, just wait here a minute," and they definitely called them because they were kind of stalling us for 10 minutes. And next thing, these two settler lads with big, massive rifles and their hands on it came and circled us. And that was one of the videos that I put up online because we were in a circle in a little group, and I just put my camera between the arms of two of the people in the group so I could video it. And it's a bizarre, surreal thing, And I remember I tagged Simon Harrison, so whoever does, if it is him or somebody else
Mm,
who looks at his social media, they did see it
mm,
because I thought this is supposedly a democracy, and what they
mm.
claim is the only democracy in the Middle East. And I'm standing here on a street, and we are being surrounded by civilians carrying M16s, you know, threatening and circling us just to intimidate us. And how is this okay?
Yeah.
You know,
That-
and separating out the Palestinians as you drive through um, the occupied territories, you can clearly start to determine which is an Israeli house and which is a Palestinian area because the roofs are normal, what we would perceive as normal here. The Palestinian homes have water tanks on them because they only have water 2 days every fortnight and they have to store the water. Um, there's quite a lot of tummy upsets because of the heat. The bacteria grows in the water, depending on how long it's there, and it might be stagnant. And I have myself, experienced it, and it was a kind of a frustrating moment on a small level, but I can't imagine living with it. I've experienced standing in the shower, and you get that's the moment where the water turns off. So then you're out trying to get jugs to rinse your hair. And I'm like, wow, you know, when you think of just that restriction on water, that one small part of the restrictions and the apartheid and the blatant discrimination, that's just water, you know?
Yeah.
That's just water. There's no
And
green spaces and camps. The walls are built increasingly closer to their homes. you know, I had to move my bed because I stayed in the camp for the 3.5 weeks, and I realized that one of the watchtowers was trained like I could see the watchtower from my bed when I laid down. So I had to move my bed behind a pillar because the feeling of sleeping under a gun, you know.
The psychological torture of that, like the essentials of living, to be rationed and deprived, and for that to be so systematic, and for that to be so normalized.
Mm,
Um, and it's there, like right under our noses, and we've got
mm.
people who call themselves defenders of democracy and
Oh
human
yeah.
rights